unnecessary pursuit of personal information and personal details, we saw that the paparazzi aggressively chased Princess Diana, relentlessly followed her to such a severe extent that it ultimately resulted in a car crash that finally led to her death. On Team India today, we find this problematic because we've seen time and time again that the media cannot act responsibly when this line between the public lives and private lives are blurred. Which is why we support the fact that laws must be enacted to prevent the media from intruding into the private lives of public figures. And through our speeches, we'll be proving to you three things. Firstly, why this right to privacy is fundamental and why it exists, especially for these public figures. Secondly, why intruding into their private lives is massively detrimental to these public figures. And through I will move on to talk to you about how our policy, in fact, improves the quality of journalism on the whole. But before moving on to my constructives, let us take you through the model that we will be implementing. Now, firstly, by media, we mean any form of outlet that releases information about certain things. So we're talking about newspapers, about magazines, about TV stations, and about the internet as well. On our public figures, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about celebrities, about actors, musicians, and sportsmen as well. Now, on team proposition today, we believe that you shouldn't intrude into anyone's private life. But we think given that public figures are disproportionately affected by the intrusions of the media, we think it's necessary to legislate in their interest as well. And we will be legislating on the basis of punishing them when they publish information that isn't directly linked to their professional careers. So we see that when they release this sort of information that isn't necessarily linked to their professional careers in any way, we will qualify that as an intrusion into their private lives. So we take, for example, the sportsmen, ladies and gentlemen, we're okay with the media publishing information about which matches they've won or whether there's evidence of doping in that circumstance. But what we're not okay with, ladies and gentlemen, is that when they reveal information about their sportsperson's personal relations, when they reveal information about their interactions with people who aren't part of their professional careers in the first place. So we think that's the line on Team India that we're willing to draw. We would be instituting a sliding scale of punishment, ladies and gentlemen, in the event that they do release this sort of information. And depending on the severity and the number of offences that the media outlet does commit, we would be instituting an immediate removal of the material and stopping the distribution of that material to begin with, moving on to things like punitive fines, and ultimately suspending the license and shutting down that media outlet to prevent this sort of information from being published in the first place. No, thank you, ma'am. So we think having established this policy, let me now move on to my first constructive, talking to you about why this right to privacy is so fundamental and exists even for private figures. Now we see, ladies and gentlemen, that the right to privacy is key to one's identity in a majority of circumstances. Because of the fact that people don't exist in a vacuum, ladies and gentlemen, we see that people constantly engage in interaction with others in society. And we see that it's important here that people are able to control their interactions in society, because how you interact with society essentially manifests in the information that is available. And we think ultimately the way you interact with society manifests as your right to privacy in these circumstances, because you should be allowed to share your private information on your own terms, ladies and gentlemen. We see that the basis of this right to privacy comes from the fact that we should be able to engage in interactions with others on our own terms and release this information that's vital to us in a capacity that we find fitting in these circumstances. No, thank you, ma'am. We see that intrusions into private life changes the very nature of these interactions that we wish to preserve because of the fact that it is important. Now we need to ask ourselves here, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to public figures, what is it that they have signed up for? Now we dispute the fact that they've consented into some form of contract to begin with, or we say that even if they have consented into anything, they've only consented into providing a service in exchange for some sort of financial reward and nothing beyond that, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that it is only when both parties do consent to doing a particular thing, we're okay with their private information being released. So we're okay with Kim Kardashian, who is willing to reveal information about her private life through the media as well. So we see that as long as this consent exists, it's okay. But in the absence of this consent, ladies and gentlemen, this contract fails to exist. Yes, ma'am.
Would you ban the media from publishing stories about regular people's private lives?
Ma'am, we see that privacy laws already exist for regular people as well. We see that because of the fact that these private figures are disproportionately affected by the intrusion of the media into their private lives, we're willing to defend them as well, and we're willing to extend this right to privacy for everyone. So we see that when both parties do consent to this sort, when both parties are consenting to this sort of revealing this information, we're okay with that. But we see that in the absence of this consent, this contract doesn't exist. And And we see, ladies and gentlemen, that it isn't inherent to this sort of contract that the private and public lives are one. Because we've seen celebrities repeatedly who choose to close off their private lives from the public. We've seen celebrities like Roger Federer who remain to stay away from the light of the media because of the fact that they believe that it is an intrusion into their right to privacy. So having established how fundamental this right to privacy is, let me now want to talk to you about why celebrities are harmed as a result of this intrusion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we see that the media aggressively pursues them, physically stalks them in a large amount of circumstances. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that the media even adopts unethical means into obtaining this sort of information by coercing their friends, by coercing their co-workers, by literally pursuing them in order to gain this sort of information. Oh, thank you, ma'am. And we see that this is even more problematic because once this information does come into the hands of these media outlets, what they do is blow it out of proportions in a context that deliberately overstates the impact of that amount of information, that deliberately exaggerates this information and portrays it in a light that wasn't meant to be in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Because we see that what's inherent to this media is sensationalizing any news that does come to them in the first place. And we see that when this line between the private and public lives are blurred, we see that this information can essentially be fabricated because you blur the lines between what's true and what's false as well. And we see that even if the media is proven to have shown something that's false, we see that ultimately at the end of the day, both their private lives and their public lives are essentially destroyed because of the fact that society's perception doesn't change about that public figure once this information is released. Because A, it's hard to deny and refute that this was false in the first place, but B, even if you do sue for things like slander, we see that these perceptions do exist. And we saw this happen in the case of Lord McAlpine, ladies and gentlemen, who was falsely portrayed as a pedophile. But even after suing the media outlet for slander, we see that Google's first search results with Lord McAlpine continues to be something about him being portrayed as a pedophile. And we find that extremely problematic, ladies and gentlemen, because this sort of perception does destroy their image at the end of the day. And we see, ladies and gentlemen, that when it comes to this sort of personal information, ideally, we would like celebrities to deal with it on their own terms, ladies and gentlemen, because these are personal issues that they can take record of and deal with it on their own terms. But when we see that this information comes in someone else's terms, like the media, we see that it essentially ruins their personal and private lives. And we're not okay with that because we see that the media cannot act responsibly when this line is blurred. And we saw this happen in the case of Marilyn Monroe as well, who was essentially driven to suicide because of the fact that her private life was systematically intruded by the media. And we find that extremely problematic. But secondly, we saw this happen in the case of Justin Fashiono as well, where the media outed him as being a homosexual even before he was ready, because he was seen as having concealed this information. He was portrayed as a liar, ladies and gentlemen, and we see that this sort of information damages their public and private lives as well. And further, we see that it even harms people who haven't consented into this contract, like their friends and like their family. So because we've shown you why this right to privacy is fundamental, and because we've shown you how public figures are disproportionately affected, we say it's called a private life for a reason, and we're very proud to propose it.
I'd like to make the first proposition for this speech and invite the first opposition speaker to open their team's case.
Opposition needs to prove to you today what side opposition stands for in this debate is that public figures do not deserve extra rights that we don't give any other person. And we will prove this to you by using 3 points. First of all, I will give an analysis of the public figure's right to privacy. Second of all, I will talk about politicians' trust. And thirdly, our second speaker will talk about why the solution does not actually solve the problem in today's modern world. But firstly, let me deal with some refutation to what we just heard from the Prime Minister. We heard that the media cannot act responsibly, that it blurs the line between truth and false. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to note that side opposition of this debate supports status quo. And under status quo, there are strict limitations on what the media is supposed to do. You cannot force someone to tell you information about a celebrity as they claim. You cannot, you cannot publish something that is entirely false and just get away with it. We have laws and we're willing to stick to them. And also, moreover, we're willing to limit what the media is able to do. But we do not want to place a ban on it. We heard that public figures do not agree to some sort of a contract. It is not inherent to them, to their private life to be published. First, I will speak about this further in my point. But we need to remember that when we get into a certain profession, we don't only think of what we'll actually have to do and the money we'll get for it. We think of other things that come to it. For example, doctors know, yes, I will treat people and I will get money, but they know that there is an emotional harm they will get as a result. And and in the same manner, public figures know that when they go ahead and you choose to be a politician or you choose to be an actress, you know that you're going to have, you're going to have to deal with your private life being on the media. Yes.
Ma'am, do you believe that there are any lines that the media shouldn't cross, and if so, what are they?
Thank you. Yes, we believe they cannot publish false stories, and that we will definitely sue magazines and newspapers that do so. Second of all, we believe that they cannot enter someone's private property. You cannot break into people's houses. You cannot do anything that's basically illegal nowadays as well. Okay, now let me move on to my first point: an analysis of the public figure's right to privacy. When we talk about the right to privacy, we talk about something that is really important to most people. We talk about our right to handle ourselves and to interact with others, as they told you, on our terms. But when you choose to get into an industry that inherently makes you be exposed to the media, looking for publishing stories about your private life, you do consent to some sort of additional terms. You do know when you go ahead and you want to be, say, the head of the CIA, you know that you have the public eye. You know that you need to be careful. You know that you will be exposed.
Ma'am?
No, thank you. People do consider things that are not necessarily directly what they're going to have to do, but also things that come along to their job additionally. And this is why we believe when you choose to be a celebrity or a politician, you know that what you're getting into, and you need to act accordingly. Second of all, we're going to talk about how they still have a choice. We're not eliminating the choice of public figures to have a private life. We're just limiting it. A lot of public figures manage to maintain a private life without getting into the media's eye. Why does that happen? Because it is a choice. Yes, it is more difficult to keep your life private when you are a famous person, but that is something that comes with the job, and everybody knows that. What we're talking about here is celebrities, like for example, Jodie Foster, that recently came out of the closet after being a celebrity for years and years, and nobody knew she was gay. Why is that? Because she managed to keep her private life private, because she did not go around and presented her relationships in public. We're talking about the choice that the person has to show others what happens. Then we'll talk about specifically politicians, and we're going to do that by 3 levels of analysis. First of all, we're going to look at how people choose their politicians. Each person in our society, no thank you, has a right to choose a politician according to the criteria they put for themselves. For example, if it's important for me to see the politician I want to choose spending a lot of time with his family, it is my right to do so. And if it is important to me that my politician will not have affairs outside of marriage, I have the right to know that. Because in a democratic country, we need to know our politicians. We need to trust them, and we need to know that the people, I'll take you in a moment, who we are giving our trust to are trustworthy. Yes?
Ma'am, so if you want to pursue your passion in singing, does it mean you write away yours and your family's right to privacy as well?
Thank you. Again, We're talking about people who chose to do so. We are aware that you're not breaking the family's right to privacy. You're solely focusing on the politicians. And secondly, as we've told you, every person has the same restrictions right now by the law. The media can post stories about you and me just as it can post stories about Demi Lovato. Okay, secondly, the people need to build trust with the politicians. Even if politicians don't do crazy things like have affairs, we need to see how the politicians act on their day-to-day life. We need to know that the person we're giving our vote for is vote worthy. And for that, this requires daily updates. We need to see the politician on his everyday life. We need to know that he's a person we can trust, and we need to be sure of that. And this is why he's justified for the media to have this intrusion for the private life of the politicians, because it is for the public's sake. And last, and most importantly, it makes politicians more careful about their behavior. Because when you're a public figure, you know you're under the public eye. And when you're a politician, this is extremely important. Because people have temptations in life. They get tempted to do things that are not exactly what we define moral. No, thank you. And when the politician knows that the media is always looking for him, and when he knows there is some sort of something that regulates what he's doing, he's going to try and avoid doing things that he would regret. He's going to avoid doing questionable things, like cheating on his wife, like committing fraud, something that actually affects an entire country. This is what we're talking about here in this debate. Not necessarily Demi Lovato's new boyfriend. We're talking about serious issues that the public needs to know. Okay, so what did I prove to you today in my speech? First of all, I showed you that public figures do choose to show their private life, to make their private life less private. And second of all, I showed you that they can maintain a private lifestyle. And thirdly, I showed you why it's extremely important for us to know our politicians, and this is why we cannot replace that ban. This is why I beg you.
It was telling me, when Team Israel came up here and told us that not systematically violating a celebrity's privacy, not publishing information about his interactions with his family, about whether or not he's gay, what his sexuality is, and so on, is affording them extra rights. We think these are rights that should be afforded to every human being, whether or not you choose to enter a career, or whether or not which career it is that you choose to enter, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that's why they've been fundamentally mistaken. This right to privacy isn't something that's exclusive to celebrities. It's something that each and every one of us as human beings has access to, and that's what we seek to protect, and that's why they missed to make any sort of a distinction in this scenario. Before moving on to my constructive argument, where I'll be talking to you about how this improves the quality of journalism on the whole, a couple of points of rebuttal. Firstly, they told us that laws exist in the status quo to prevent false information and so on. Firstly, we question why the onus should be on a person, ladies and gentlemen, to prove that information that someone else has published is false. We think it should be instead on the media to not publish this information in the first place, and that's best done through our model, because it's incredibly easy to blur the lines between false and fact by using a he said, she said approach, ladies and gentlemen, when you're reporting on things like celebrities, when you're reporting on people like sports people. But secondly, they didn't respond to any of Arjun's analysis that by the time these people sue and prove that it's false, massive harms are already accrued. We point you, ladies and gentlemen, to the example, for instance, of Dominique Strauss-Kahn. We tell you that the fact that before the court even decided whether or not he had actually committed an act of sexual offense, the media essentially decided for them, ladies and gentlemen, that he was actually a criminal. It destroyed his career, it destroyed his possibility of continuing with his life as it was before. We think that's incredibly damaging. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they told us that these celebrities consent into it, and that they know that if you enter a certain profession, they'll be exposed to the media. We think, first of all, this media conflation with certain careers shouldn't exist at all, and that's what we're standing for on our side of the house. Secondly, we question what kind of choice it is that they're actually giving them. We tell you that they're forcing this kind of media exposure and media spotlight on these people. We ask them in a POI, ladies and gentlemen, why does the fact that I have a passion for singing and want to pursue singing as a career necessarily mean that I right away the right to privacy of myself and my family? The fact that they didn't have an answer to that, no, thank you, shows, ladies and gentlemen, that these are simply careers that people agree to go into, but they have not agreed to any of the additional things that they've talked about. They haven't agreed to the media scrutiny, they haven't agreed, and we gave you examples of people who prove this, ladies and gentlemen, people like Jack Nicholson, people like Roger Federer, who fiercely protect their private life, proof, ladies and gentlemen, that getting into a public sphere doesn't mean giving up your private life. But finally, no, thank you, they told us in response to this that these people have managed to keep their life private. We find that kind of phrasing exactly what's going wrong for them. We don't think it should be on these celebrities to somehow manage to keep their private life private. We think it should be all of society's responsibility to respect the fact that just like any of us, they have a right to privacy too. Finally, they gave us an argument about politicians. They simply asserted that we have a right to know about the private lives of these politicians without in any way linking that to their capabilities as a politician. We don't know, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of 8 minutes of their speech, why knowing whether or not that man has 2 Ferraris or 3 impacts his ability to govern a nation. But secondly, we tell you that where it does impact his ability to govern the nation, we're more than happy to publish. So if he's being corrupt, if he's accepting bribes, we're fine to publish that. If he's using public money, ladies and gentlemen, to fund his private life, we're happy to publish that because that's directly linked to his career, and that's something that we accept as illegal. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, they haven't responded to any of our analysis about how this directly harms these celebrities and these people, these public figures themselves. That if you've had a marital affair, for instance, you might choose, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about it with your partner and try to come out of it on your own. We tell you it's incredibly hard to do that when the media is continuously publishing information, when the paparazzi is sitting outside your house every single day, ladies and gentlemen. There's an incredible pressure from all around you to bring this information out in public life. So because they haven't responded to that, we now move on to my constructive argument. I'm going to be talking to you about why this improves the quality of journalism. We tell you that the media is an institution that should provide news in the public's interest and not just provide news that interests the public. We tell you that there exists a very true distinction between the two things. We tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that in the status quo, it's far easier for the media to make the low-hanging fruit of sensationalized private information sound interesting to the public, rather than to make things like election coverage, things, ladies and gentlemen, which impact the governance of our country, impact the rule of law, and impact the ability of our country to function as a democracy. By itself, we say that this kind of news that these people publish often has no public value. We question the public value of posting pictures of naked actors or naked celebrities in the newspaper, ladies and gentlemen, and they cannot prove to us that that has some sort of value to the way, ladies and gentlemen, we function as a society. We'll talk about what actually, in a second, sir, we'll talk about what actually provides this information. Yes?
The media's job isn't only to protect society and democracy. It is also for entertainment, for another array of things.
Ladies and gentlemen, we find it incredibly offensive that they think we should be able to use the private lives of others and the lives that these people choose to live as entertainment for us. We say watching, ladies and gentlemen, a movie is entertainment, violating the privacy of somebody else and destroying their livelihoods and destroying the way they interact with others is not entertainment, and we don't think that's what should be construed as entertainment anyway. So what happens in the status quo? We tell you that there exists an incredibly dangerous race to the bottom between media outlets. Because to maintain profits, as long as this sort of thing is legal, they have to do this in order to maintain the competition. So 3 things happen. Firstly, we tell you that media outlets further and further push this kind of privacy. We give you the example, ladies and gentlemen, of the French magazine Closer, for instance, which was caught recently taking photos of Kate Middleton while on vacation, ladies and gentlemen, using a camera from 2 kilometers away. We tell you this is the kind of things that happen when you have to be, ladies and gentlemen, the one posting the most salacious information, publishing the most outrageous facts, no thank you, in order to maintain their profits and maintain their bottom line. But secondly, we say because you have to be the people to get there first, because you have to be the media outlet that publishes this information and gets it out first, it makes it incredibly easy for these people to publish information without verifying it. Arjun already gave you the example of Lord McAlpine. They haven't given us any response to that. The Thirdly, we say what it does is that it saturates media outlets with this information. Every time you switch on the news, every time you log on to a news website, you're attacked by news alerts, ladies and gentlemen, about who a celebrity is now going out with, who it is that they're having an affair with. We say all these sorts of saturation by this kind of news automatically means that it's far harder for that viewer, for that person, to continue reading the newspaper and read the rest of the information, maybe in the bottom line of page 3, ladies and gentlemen, about election coverage. So when you stop media outlets from publishing this information, we tell you that these media outlets continue to publish newspapers. They continue to be media outlets, and they have to maintain their viewers and maintain their profit margins. This forces them to engage their viewers and engage their readers through other news. It pushes things like investigative journalism. It pushes things, ladies and gentlemen, to make things like election coverage, or make things such as the kind of laws that are being passed in Parliament interesting to the public and accessible to the public. And we think that's a good thing, because it reduces voter apathy, it makes for a stronger democracy, and makes for a stronger media that actually works in the interest of the public. So because it's called a private life for a reason, we are very proud to propose.
So it seems that the proposition has decided not to actually answer any of the parts of our point about politicians. We said that those private details are relevant because they do affect how they work. They can affect how they work. They are relevant. We said to you that irrelevant private details can decide our trust. It is our right as citizens to decide what our trust is built upon, and you can't dictate for us what should our trust be built upon and what it shouldn't. And third, and we had absolutely no answer to that, is that this keeps politicians honest, and it keeps them from doing things that we don't want them to do. So no answer to that. And why don't we have an answer to that? Because because they don't have an answer. They know we are right when we say that this is crucial in the case of politicians. Not only, it is not a coincidence that media is called the guardian of democracy. It is there to stand and keep our public figures, our politicians, in line, to monitor them, to keep that we, the citizens of a democratic country, know the things that politicians do, because we have the right to know. So, I will start with a few words of rebuttal, and then I go on to my constructive part about why this proposition will only marginally change anything, and it actually won't help that much. So, first of all, the previous speaker told us that force is blurrable, and that it can be changed, and he said that, this said that. Don't you say, we have a court system. It is an established set of rules of what counts as evidence and what doesn't count as evidence. So. And the fact that something in court, no thank you, should be proved as false in order to be exempt and to be punished isn't true. It has to be proved to be more probable to be false than to be true. If the most evidence goes to false and not to true, and if there's not enough evidence to true, then it's illegal. You don't have to prove above all kind of suspect that it is illegal, that it is false. So, furthermore, they tell us that by the time they prove falsity, the damage is done. To which you say, and they thought that we impair the way they interact with other people. But we say, the only example we heard of one of these scandals seriously damaging a public figure is in the case of an unconvicted rapist, which they have told about us from a country which I don't remember exactly what it was. So we claim that in these cases, no thank you, we claim that first of all, here, thank you, sorry. We claim that we should put in the newspaper, someone should check if it's true before it's published. But someone should check it's true, and excluding ban of any private data is a completely different thing. Furthermore, they asked us why, by agreeing to be a singer, someone should hurt your privacy. To which you say two things. No, thank you. You don't have to hurt your privacy by agreeing to be a singer. You hurt your privacy if you agree to be a very famous savior. And we say that this is a part of your job's risk. The same way that although it's not written in the contract, you accept as a plumber that your job will be dirty, and as a lawyer that you will have to work long hours. This is something that is absolutely expected. It happens in all cases. And to his point, we think that it's off-clash. Those pictures of naked celebrities do not come at the expense of political analysis. They come at the expense of other kinds of gossip. They come at the expense of the sports part. They don't come at the expense of quality journalism. No, thank you. So, to my constructive part. Proposition won't work and won't change status quo substantially. There are three reasons to that. First of all, celebrities publish a lot of data themselves. We see that celebrities use Twitter. Sarah Palin uses Twitter and publish everything she does. Miley Cyrus uses Twitter and told us a lot of data about what she does. No, thank you. And we see that almost all politicians, like Obama, have managed Facebook pages in which they publicize to the public what they do. So it is not that the public figures will have complete private life. It will be not. People will still know most of what they do, and they won't have private life. So the second reason is that the average person will get to this data alone. We think that, no thank you. We are not allowing journalists to enter someone's home. We are not allowing journalists anything that we're not allowing the average person. The average person that sees a celebrity in a cafe will picture him, and then he will post this on his Facebook, and he will post this in the internet. And thus, all of this will get known without censoring the media. The same way that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson when they got together, the first meeting, the picture of it was published by a fangirl and not by the media at the end of this reason. So we see that those people will get those pictures and that their private life isn't completely dependent on the media. Yes?
Can you finally explain to us why knowledge of the ability to govern is contingent to knowing personal, private information about the lives of politicians?
So, we already explained that and you gave no answer. We have two answers to that. First of all, we say that the fact that you have some disease or the fact that you have a Roman with someone can indeed affect the way you govern because for a long array of reasons that our first speaker told you. No, thank you. But furthermore, you do not have the right to decree for the citizens what they consider important for their trust and what do they not. And we have not heard an answer to that from side proposition. So to my third reason, and that is virality. No, thank you. If once the media had the advantage of the fact that it was more publicized and information that someone got would not get published widely, the internet has changed that. Clear example of things that were got to know widely just because they got viral are Connie, and are many more examples. We can even see that there are pictures that first go viral and then are addressed by the media. So, we say that because we have YouTube, because we have Facebook, because we have Twitter, because we have Tumblr, politicians' private life is not protected anyway. The only actual thing that happens with politicians' right of life is that it gets slightly harder for them to protect it. We have plenty of examples, like Johnny Depp, which were given to you before, and you given to, that public figures can keep their lives private. So, on your side of the house, we only have this slightly more hard situation for them, which is certainly unacceptable. Certainly it's acceptable that they concede this for their public role. For all these reasons, we think that you should oppose.
Don't worry, we don't need you to get the belt. Don't worry, it's fine, don't worry.
It's okay. You have to hold it. what Team Israel has told you is that we're affording extra rights to public figures. What they've told you is that because public figures are public figures, they've magically consented to something that they never did, and they deserve to have all of their personal details aired out in public. Since when do contracts work on the basis of one party deciding unilaterally that something should be done, but the other party specifically says they don't want it infringed upon? This is not an extra right we guarantee to public figures, because we guarantee this to normal citizens as well, as our first two speakers told you. I ask you three questions. Firstly, is there a universal right to privacy? Secondly, this theme better protects private and public lives. And thirdly, this theme betters the overall quality of journalism. Now, what Israel has been claiming is that we gave them extra rights. Right? Like I just said, we don't give them any extra rights. But the main other contention, ladies and gentlemen, was that there was some form of consent. Since our first speech, what we told you is that consent simply doesn't exist. Because I choose to be a singer and I choose to sing in public, does not mean that I or my family members consent to any of this, ladies and gentlemen. I do not consent to have my public details aired out in public. And it's simply true because throughout the world of celebrities, we see that some individuals choose and try to make sure that their details are concealed, whereas others choose voluntarily to give out certain information to the public. Now, they said it's inherent to the job that somehow, because you choose to become a celebrity, it's inherent that your privacy deserves to be violated. No, it isn't, ladies and gentlemen. Like we said, there's nothing inherent about the job that means that you lose your right to privacy. And we told you that none of this losing of right to privacy then results in something that is constructive for society. Dhruva asked you an important question. Who should the onus be on to protect privacy? No response from team opposition. Because what we've been telling you from the first speech is that because, ladies and gentlemen, the right to privacy exists, and they've been claiming that you should try your best to protect privacy, but the media will try and systematically violate it. We say that's false. Your onus is not to protect your right on your own, right? The state should then be helping you secure a right if you recognize that it exists. They haven't dealt with that analysis. The other piece of analysis was politicians. Our politicians deserve to have everything aired out in public because they're suddenly public figures. Firstly, we ask, ladies and gentlemen, on what basis do we elect politicians? We currently elect them based on stated policy, on policy goals. We elect them based on their track record, and we elect them based on the vision they have for the country. No, ma'am. Under our policy, we are not against revealing criminal activities that these politicians are doing. They brought up two cases, right? Firstly, I said, what if that politician is having an affair? That has no bearing on how you govern, whether or not you are sleeping with your wife or with someone else. But secondly, we tell you, the second example was fraud. Is that politician committing fraud? If he is, we will continue to reveal that information. We haven't heard an answer on that. Why is that? Because you do believe that if you're committing an illegal activity that is then no longer private, because it is part of your professional life and the career you signed up for, that is what is inherent to your job. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that politicians should have full disclosure, will you mandate that they reveal everything about their lives? In the US presidential election, we saw that Mitt Romney could get away with not releasing his tax returns because he knew that that was something he wanted to keep private. He could still be a politician and people could still elect him or choose not to elect him based on his stated goals and based on his policies, not because they had to know everything about his life. Yeah.
And we believe that if people had known everything about his life, they would have made a more informed and better decision.
We simply believe, ladies and gentlemen, that if an individual chooses not to reveal information, and if that information has no bearing on legality, if it's not illegal information, it should not be violated systematically. If someone actually revealed, no ma'am, that Mitt Romney was a tax cheat who actually evaded tax systematically, that's fine, we would reveal it. But we tell you that private lives should simply be kept private and informed decisions can be made by voters. Secondly, this scheme better protects the private and public lives of these individuals. We told you from the first piece that simply because slander is illegal, right, it doesn't prevent many of the harms that accrue from slander. There was a telling line in the latest piece when they said, if something is more false than true, then we can prosecute them in court and take it down for slander. The trouble is, ladies and gentlemen, that even if it's slightly more true than false, or if it's a blurred line, the media assumes it's true and pushes it on the public as truth, as fact. And the public, simply because there's no accountability, buys into that argument in the context that the media presents it. That's the worst part, right? Because any of this information, if released on the terms of the individual, then has an opportunity to then be constructively discussed, not on the terms of the media itself. But then, ladies and gentlemen, the other problem was that the internet exists and that everything will come out anyway. We give you three very clear responses. Firstly, established media organizations won't touch it with a 10-meter pole because they will then be prosecuted for this action. Secondly, because these individuals on the internet have zero credibility, the damages that are caused by disinformation is much less. Thirdly, and gentlemen, because of the massively lower resources that a man on YouTube has to find this information, we tell you that it's far less likely that it will be systematically violated for the privacy of an individual. 3 responses, we'd like to respond to the next piece. But thirdly, and gentlemen, we told you about the massive harms that accrue because of the violation of privacy. Arjun gave you very clear analysis on both how the private and the public lives are ruined based on the information that the media offers. We saw in gentlemen that in the case of Tiger Woods, right, there was nothing about his sport that was harmed because